And when I was born, when I was brought from the maternity house, first time home from the maternity house, my grandmother met me at the door. That was the first thing what she did. She put me on the piano and she said she's going to be a musician.
Welcome to Voices of the Ancestors, where we explore Georgian polyphonic songs
and the women who sing them. Hello, the voices today are me, Susan Thompson.
and me, Holly Taylor-Zuntz, and we are both in Tbilisi. I'm so glad I can bring you listeners along on my journey through Georgia. I'm making sure to share snippets of life here on our Facebook stories for you to enjoy.
And for the first time in our podcast history, we are working in the same room.
And we are talking to you on our new Tula mic, just arrived today, paid for by you lovely Ko-fi supporters. So big thanks and madlova.
We are now focusing on making the podcast sustainable, creatively, energetically, and financially. Despite our posts on social media, it's not all fun and games.
Yeah, today it's sunny and warm outside, but we're here inside working on this episode for you. And to continue the podcast beyond this summer, we need to be valued for our time. So check out our new Ko-fi goal and see how you could help. That's ko-fi.com/Voices of the Ancestors.
Now, our guest today is Nana Mzhavanadze. This was another first, as Holly, Nana and I were all in the same room. And there were several others too. It was a surprise when our guest brought guests.
Let me set the scene for you. Nana is sat with her uncle Rebuli on one side of her and cousin Marekhi on the other. So when you hear Nana say he or him, she refers to Rebuli. This is a pretty significant event for their family. They haven't sung together for 10 years or more. If you've been taught by Nana or even just heard her sing, you'll enjoy this playful hour where she experiments musically with her family. Enjoy! So, welcome Nana to our podcast. It's so nice to have you here. How would you introduce yourself for us?
Thank you very much for inviting, and yes, I'm happy to introduce ourselves to our audience. It's me, Nana Mzhavanadze. I am a musician. I don't know if it's the right English, by birth. Professionally also I'm an ethnomusicologist. So, and here I have my uncle, Rebuli Mzhavanadze, my father's brother. He's now probably 76. He was born in 1945.
Welcome,
so my math is good enough. Yeah. I think I calculated right. And his daughter, my cousin Marekhi Mzhavanadze, and his granddaughter, Marekhi's daughter, Lizzie. Little Lizzie. So that's our part of our family. Unfortunately, we don't have with us our very precious old generation, like my grandmother and grandfather, and my great-grandmother, who I remember very well, and my great-grandfather, who I never met.
And were all of your family extraordinary musicians?
I don't like to talk about how talented we are. I think it's not the right thing, but for some reason, when I when I met her first time, and she wanted to know about me a lot, and I never told her the story of my family because I thought that was very ordinary thing. But then she would insist and make me tell more and more. And then I tried to remember things from my childhood, about my grandparents, about my family. And she found them very, very special. And I thought to myself, why is this so special? I did not find anything special about this. But then I realized, then probably yes, because I was born in a very musical family, and since I was and I remember when I was born with music, and I heard music all my life. And when I was brought from the maternity house, first time home from the maternity house, my grandmother met me at the entrance door, and took me. She took me from hands of my mother, and it was very, very cold November weather, and she took me upstairs and where it was very cold, but that was the first thing what she did. She put me on the piano, and she said she's going to be a musician. So that was my first introduction or touch with physically with music. And they all sang. I met as I said, my great grandmother, my grandfather's mother, Mariam Georgian, who was extraordinary woman in many ways, very talented, and she was also a very talented musician and a dancer. And they say that she played this little tsiko tsiko. He also remembers that. You know this very little accordion.
Yes.
Tsiko tsiko. She used to play this tsiko tsiko so well. It does not have much possibility. This is a very limited. But she was such a great master that she made the whole neighborhood dance. Wow.
It looks like a toy, doesn't it?
Yes,
it's so tiny.
But she was an extraordinary woman. She made it like a real instrument so that everybody wanted to dance.
Wow.
And she was actually, now he remembers, I interviewed him a couple of years ago, and he remembered that she, as a little woman, she was made in a noble family in Batumi. Maybe she was like 10 or 12 years old, and she was educated there by the family. Okay. She could speak Russian and Armenian, and she sang in a church in Batumi. Yeah. And then when she married and when she lived in Ozurgeti, where I come also from, that was the time when Armenians and Turkish, this genocide in Turkey. Armenians left Turkey, and lots of Armenians moved to Ozurgeti. And in our neighborhood, we have quite a bit of Armenian people, families living. And because she spoke Armenian, she was serving the government as a translator for the Armenian community. Yeah, and I remember her teaching me Russian as well. She was a very special woman. So her nickname was a nightingale. She had a beautiful, very sweet timbre, and she was singing beautifully. And he sometimes thinks, and he says to me that I remind him of his grandmother, this nightingale. Yes. I'm not that. Actually, what I want to say, my family is very talented. I am the least talented in my family.
Well, I think some of our listeners remember, if they've met you, the one thing that they really remember is your voice, I think. Especially, I know people, like when you run workshops in the UK, and they say, like, once you hear Nana's voice, you don't forget it. So maybe we can hear it now that we have
Thank you.
These three wonderful family musicians in one room. Maybe now's a good time for a song.
Okay.
Is there a song that reminds you of your ancestors?
There are so many songs that would remind me of my ancestors, but maybe something which we could just sing together because we never saw each other, like three of us, for many years. Maybe 3 of us together for many years. We never sang together for many years.
Well, so glad that you could come together for this.
She's going to be bass.
Very good. We like.
Yes.
He can play between us. I believe he can do very beautiful things. Didi, khnidan, Gagitsani, ethnomusicologist, It's so funny to have her deep bass.
Wow. Wonderful. Can you, maybe anyone say something about that song?
რაღაცა რო გითხრა ამ სიმღერაზე, ამ კონკრეტულ სიმღერაზე.
ამ კონკრეტულ სიმღერაზე ტექსტი უნდა ყველაფერს. სასიყვარულო არის, ხო?
ხო, რამე ისტორია მის საიდან გაქვს, საიდან იცის?
ახლა ვერ გეტყვი, ახლა გურულის საღიგინო სიმღერა არის, მაგრამ საღიგინო სიმღერები ხო იცნობია.
Well, the text of the song tells everything about it. It's a love song, and as to the origins, it's hard to say where it comes from. Or this is something which we've never investigated, just heard many times, and it's something which you can. It's called, like, as he says, something like you could humming, like quiet ririni, to sing with ririni. Which only he believes it's only Gurians who have this kind of ririni songs.
So you. Today you've come down from the village to meet us, and is this the kind of song that you would sing on it every day? Like, do you sing every day in the village? Is it part of your life?
Თქვენ ხა ჩამოხვედით ხო საფლიდან, ნუ საფელია ხო ეხლა თბილისთან შედარებით და ეს ტიპის სიმღერებია, რომელსაც თქვენ ყოველდღიურად მღერით ხო, ყოველდღიურ სიმღერა. Yeah, this would be like the song which would be sung, maybe this kind of repertoire for every day. Well, I've never sung this since I was a child. He says, but we've heard. Well, now it's less and less when we sing. I mean, not we as a family, we don't see each other, but families don't really sing unless you are a singing family and want to. but it's not the traditional music is not as much as it used to be part of everyday life anymore, as you know.
Yeah.
Nothing new about it, sadly. But I heard quite a bit of, because we had the family which was, the house was full of guests. Every day, every single day, we had guests. And I remember, especially in winter, it was not that easy because we had only one room heated. And this was little, like maybe not even half of this. And can you imagine with television, TV set, table in the middle, and the fireplace, and maybe 10 people around the table, mostly men, not mostly men,
Yes.
masculine community, and smoking, and hardly seeing each other, and singing and drinking. And I myself, because it was the only heated room, just sitting in the corner and doing the homework for school. And from time to time, I and my sister, we would be called by the guests to sing.
Yes.
And we would drop everything, go sing. That's my memory of my childhood. This is my childhood, most vivid childhood memory.
Yeah.
And the smoky room especially, and the singers singing, because my grandparents were singers. Their friends or the family, they also were singers, and quite a bit of good singers would come together around this table, and they all sang all the time. Yeah, and therefore I don't learn songs. I don't remember myself sitting, practicing, learning parts.
Yes.
For me, it's just memory and language, which I adopted since I was very little. And I was told that when I turned 1 year old, I sang at my birthday. But the same for him. I believe he's more than, because he had more experience and better ear as well, and better musical memory. And he just can sing anything. And he mastered this language. And I think I was telling you before that I remember this photograph of him, which I could not find at home now. He's very little, he was very small. Maybe he's like 4 or 5 years old in this photo. And he's sitting on a high chair, and he has a big, I lose the memory of accordion maybe in his hand. And you cannot see him. You can see only his feet, which is hanging down and he is playing the accordion. He would play anything he touched. And he was fond he's a fisherman. He loved the water, and he loved fishing up to now. And I grew with fish. I remember fish was my main dish. And our family had almost every day we had fish. But sometimes he would not be a good boy, and he would use this
explosives.
Yes. And one day he lost his fingers.
I know. I saw.
But he plays with this.
Still
plays.
Wow.
He plays chonguri. He plays piano. If you don't look at him, you would not tell he doesn't have fingers.
My goodness.
And because he had this special talent, my grandparents took him to the musical school, but the music teacher could not do anything with him. And she said, "No, I can't. This is impossible." He was not the person who could sit and just, you couldn't make him sit and do something. And also, they could not teach him anything. And then they told my grandparents to take him to this special school in Tbilisi, which is called the school by Conservatoire. I think it was the school for musically talented children. And he went there and they left him there. But he could not, he dropped everything in a few months and he left. And he came back because he was missing water, he was missing this crazy type of life. He could not fit in with the disciplined, that was not him. But later, when I went to the college, musical college, I met this man who was the deputy director of the college, and when he heard I was Mzhavanadze, he asked me about Rebuli, and he turned out to be Rebuli's classmate at this special, and he said, "Are you as talented as him?"
Were you a student of Edisha? Did you meet Edisha?
Yes, I met Edisha, and I'm very grateful. I was his student in, you know what he taught me. He was supposed to teach me to transcribe the music.
Ah, okay.
To notate.
Okay.
But we never had that.
Okay.
No, but he gave me complete freedom. He would never tell me how to do things or what to do. He would just give me freedom. And once I remember when I finished, when I graduated and I got back home, I remember one winter day, a guy who, let's say he was a kind of a singer, not singer, but he loved folk traditional singing. And he visited us in my house in Ozurgeti. And we hosted him, and he never had been to us before. So he had I don't remember what kind of request about folk music. And maybe it's like now I probably am self-praising, but in a way, yes, I'm self-praising, but it's more interesting from the perspective of Edisha, or about Edisha, what kind of personality he was. And he had a question about Georgian traditional music, and he asked Edisha for help, and Edisha told him that, "Why would you come to me? You have Nana there." I was very surprised because I had done nothing before. I did not understand how could Edisha know what I could do and how I could do things. But he somehow made me my name somehow. He was this kind of very, very, very modest, humble personality, unbelievably humble, and talented. For me, personality matters sometimes more than talent. And I think they are quite, they should be quite balanced, or somehow they are balanced.
So I know that you teach many people. Do you teach Elizabeth, who's here?
Please, no.
No, you have
because
never
I
taught
never had the opportunity to spend any time with my family at all. So, and actually, when we talk about teaching, I did not teach music even to my children because I've never been taught music.
Yes, that's where
For me, it's a little bit strange thing. Yes, I thought that people who are musicians, they just are musicians. That was wrong. I now regret I didn't do that with my children.
Oh, yes.
Very much, because maybe not all of them have this opportunity to be brought up like I was, in very natural environment. Yes, I remember when I was little, I hated to go to sleep. My parents found it very difficult to make me sleep. Yes. So it was a big ritual for them and hard.
Yes.
And then they introduced the method to make their life easier for me.
Yes.
And what was this method? My grandparents would tell me, "Okay, let's go and play." let's go together and we can play. And that was something magic for me, and I would go because what the game was about was that I knew that they would put me between themselves and they would start to sing, and I was supposed to sing, so 3 voices, right?
Yes.
The third voice, one of the voices, and the essence of the game was that they would switch the voices, and I had to hear, and I had to find my place.
Wow.
And I loved that, obviously. I
yes.
remember that. I don't remember how old I was. I was very little, but I can't tell you how old exactly. Before school.
Yes.
Before my... And that was the way for them to have me put asleep. She hears her mother, maybe not as much as I did. As I told you, I heard so many people singing every day. It's changed now, so we have to teach them now.
Which is, So for you, teaching Georgian songs, not in Georgia, but in other countries, to other nationalities, in the style of a teacher, what is that like?
It was very difficult, especially in the beginning, because for me, because I never learned songs, and suddenly I'm exposed to a group, and they expect me to teach individual voices, which I don't know myself. And then I start to force myself. What happens is that when I teach one song a couple of times, then it's easier. But sometimes, and quite a lot of time, and I like this kind of challenge for myself. I don't like to go through the same route again and again. And sometimes I put myself on this kind of, it's like a test. This is a challenge, as I said. So I just take a song which I never sang in my life before, but I heard. So then I am in front of the group and I start to hear it in my head, but all the 3 voices. Then I have to extract one voice out of this and teach. And at the same time, nobody should know what I am doing. I'm experimenting like that. And sometimes I succeed, and it's good. And it's such a relief. But depends on the song as well. And sometimes I struggle, but still I should make sure that they don't know that I struggle. So now I am getting used to it more and more, and it's like training for myself. I always say when I teach, I learn. I teach myself. I teach others and I learn myself. I'm not the person who thinks that Georgian music is the best thing in the world. I love Georgian music. I love to play with that and experiment with this, but I don't like when we put ourselves on pedestal and say that Georgian music is everything, because music is wonder, and there is this variety makes me like, it's like a heaven you can fly, and therefore I have the times when I enjoy this type of music and I want to experiment with that. I want to sing something from that culture or tradition.
So when you're going to other countries, either as a teacher or maybe you're touring with Sathanao, do you feel you're also learning songs from those countries? Do you also pick up songs?
I love that. I want to.
Yeah.
And if I have time and luxury to do that, I'm very happy. And I don't want to all the time talk about Georgian music when I meet other people. I want to sing only Georgian music and make them listen to us all the time. But I want to hear their music as well. Maybe more than...
I understand that. It's the reverse here. But and do you create music yourself?
I'm hopeless with that. My dream is I want to so much because I have such desire to compose, but I have zero talent for that.
And is that the same for all the family?
Muzika წერეთ რომელიმე?
რა თქმა უნდა პასუხი გიწი არა.
რა მუსიკა მოგსვლია აზრად შეგიქმნია? Strange. No. Yeah. I tried once. I remember at school because I sang and they would make me sing for every single occasion.
Of course.
They decided I could make a music and one teacher asked me to write a song for something. That was some occasion they wanted me to write a song and I could not say no. And I came back home and I looked for the lyrics and I found something and I wrote a song. Horrible. They loved it. But that was the worst thing I've ever heard and I've ever sung in my life. And I said, no, I'm never doing this again, but I want to.
So interesting.
That's strange. Yes, very strange, but that's how it is. So you have to have the talent to write music.
Because I've always found it very curious in the folk world, sort of the idea that folk songs are written by many people, by a village. And I'm never sure, can that be? Surely a song is, one person creates a song, perhaps the village then changes it, and modifies it, but...
Depends on what kind of depends on the context. I think there are communities where people are so much together that they can be like very spontaneous birth. Ramets I experimenti რო გავაკეთოთ ჩავატარო.
Experimentos.
I just thought maybe we could experiment with something. What he can do, for example.
Great idea.
Yeah. In two voices.
Yes.
Patara Sakhvarelo. Patara Sakhvarelo. ორხმაში რო თქვა. That's ginda, but he says that we need sometimes bass, so he will insert.
Play the game. Yeah, play the game.
He will run back and forth. Patara Sakhvarelo. I changed the mode. I shifted. I changed the mode. And he said, you shifted it one step higher. I never know where. Არა, ის ადგილი ეგრე But then I got back to home.
I love to see the intense listening between you.
We need to.
But also the game. You're playing a game together.
He tried to catch up with me because I was off the road a couple of times. And it's especially difficult when you do it in two voices. This is actually this is interesting problem or question. You touched on this when you said something about how music can be born.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a very, very special problem. I mean, the answer to it is very difficult to find. But yeah, I think it depends on the context. But we can talk about this later.
We've only got three of you here for a short time, and it would be sad not to hear more singing.
Maybe we can just sing one song.
I was about to say,
not folk, but in folk style.
Okay.
But you've probably heard this like Alilo song from the movie, Georgian movie. Christmas, not Christmas season, but yeah. Still by very talented Georgian musician, orchestra director, and the composer and the singer Gagitsani.
Yes.
And I think also his son. I think they did it together. I'm not sure.
It's another story.
No, I mean, I'm not sure if both are
Yeah.
the authors. He definitely is. Hot da chutza dekember salilo Christe ishva Bethlehem salilo Angelos tagundi galopsa Iesoda bade pulalilo Angelos tagundi galos halilo Iesoda bade pulalilo Cis crisaret chamore capsame bugi uplis helit angelos tagundi galos halilo Gicharoden angelos nigi galoben cis crisalilo Gicharoden angelos nigi galoben cis crisalilo Iesoda bade Iesoda bade Iesoda bade Iesoda bade
Madlova.
Bye! I'm so happy. See you when we finished soon.
Yes, see you soon.
Well, thank you, because you heard us
I know
sing
we're not
again
finished.
together.
Well, exactly, that's what's so
That
special.
felt so special.
That you're in the room together, finding each other's
That's your doing.
person
Thank
again.
to you.
Yeah.
We have to go back to singing. When I come to the village more, maybe we can come together. Actually, with these online sessions, I want to involve them to record not only myself as a teacher, but also those individual voices, because Rebuli can do miracles with the voices.
Yes, so bringing
It will
them...
be sad, because sometimes I feel guilty that I bring the songs to the West, which I owe
Which have come from so many people.
to many people. Also from the field work, I heard them, and nobody knows them. And it's sad that they know only me, and I'm like a second-hand teacher. But behind me, these people who are beautiful singers and masters, and you don't know them, and it's sad. In a way, I feel guilty because of that.
Yeah.
So
well, maybe that's something good from the pandemic then, because on Zoom you can take a computer or something to these people in the village in very remote places, and people all around the world could see them and know and learn from them. And maybe that wouldn't be possible otherwise.
yeah, that would be, yes, absolutely. And also when I paid for my work, I could also share this with them, not only myself, because as I said, I learn from them. I hear this music from them.
Yes, that's such a nice idea. It's sort of paying it back.
Yeah.
Right?
It's great.
Not only paying the tribute, but also a little bit financial motivation for them too.
Yeah, and paying it forward as well for the next generations to learn from them as well. So.
Yeah, I was so happy that Elizabeth was here. It was like, it just felt so right that she was here, hearing you three and hearing your family stories from her family. It's like, yes, I'm so pleased.
Yeah.
So pleased.
Yeah. So I would love to know about Sathanao. Actually, that's an ensemble that you're part of, and you've been part of it for a long time, I think.
Yes and no, in a way, because yes, we started when I was a student of conservatory in the 1990s, and then it started from Anchishati choir actually. Then Anchishati boys choir. Anchishati.
Oh, Anchishati, not
Malchazis boys. They revived, as you know, church music. They discovered this on the shelves of the archives, and they recovered this music and they put them back to life, and they made it available, accessible to everyone. That was a big thing. And we girls, the students, so we were friends with them, and it was actually Malchas who had this idea, maybe, and they started to sing in Anchishati, and Malchas said, maybe you could also do this as girls group. And we went to Jvaris Mama. You know Jvaris Mama on Veselice Street, the very first church down the...
Yeah.
And we started to sing there. Actually, we were the first women's choir in Georgia to start singing, who also revived church music and started singing in the church. Sathanao is the later name, but the first group of girls, and I was part of that, we are the first women's group who started singing church music in the church. Wow. And in parallel with Anchishati boys. And then later, with this very hard and I would say tragic historical events with the civil war and so on, we partied, and I left Tbilisi because I was from Gurian, and I went back to Gurian, and that was impossible. That time was so difficult that we lost connections, and it was impossible to communicate. And but some of the girls who were from Tbilisi or in Tbilisi, they continued singing together in Anchishati. Later, in 2004 or 5 or something, I don't remember exactly, it was actually Malchaz's idea to reunite. But I was still in Guria, and what happened? The girls reunited, and they would ask me to join them if they had some gigs or so I would go there from time to time, and that was very special because I had not seen them for years, and suddenly we came back again. And then they decided to really start a choir, but not in the church. we didn't sing in the church any longer, but just the choir to sing both church music and the folk music. And they, one of our friends, it was not the only group, the group only from the old church choir, but it became wide, so some other girls joined in, and then one of the girls brought the name Sathanao, and we became Sathanao. And then I moved to Tbilisi, and then I started with I moved to Tbilisi upon invitation of Madge Bray. And that's how I got back to music. Otherwise, I had been doing completely different things, like working for non-governmental organization about health, in projects related to health, something about health, reproductive health, the rabbit farm, and so on and so on. And then Madge brought me back to music. That was a very special time for me to make this decision to leave everything and go back to Tbilisi. And Madge brought me to, that was the first time, first country, England and Scotland, where she took me to introduce Georgian music to the community. She knew different communities in England and Scotland. So, and then I started to. Before then, I had never taught, and I had never even sung properly. I mean, this music, except those little. I sang church music with the girls, but not folk music until very late. My folk music experience is related to my family, and that's only about hearing.
Yes.
Just hearing.
Yeah. So that would be Gurian music.
Not only, but most of
Mostly.
them, yes. Mostly Gurian, yes. Gurian. Actually, it's interesting because once we were recording Tristan Sikharulidze, and my uncle also was there for the New Year celebration, and they sang lot of Gurian songs. And at the end, I asked them to finish with Raval Jamieri, which was not Gurian Raval Jamieri, but Gagitsani Raval Jamieri. And I remember, I never forget Guri. Suddenly he was such a sweet man, but suddenly he got angry, and he said, "What? I would not like to do this Chinese rubbish." He said. And that was shocking. He was a beautiful musician, but that's so interesting that he found the non-Gurian music not quite quality music. Not the quality for him was just Chinese in very negative connotation.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that he was not good musician enough. His language was Gurian, and he found it foreign language somehow, musically.
Yeah. But you've managed to step outside of that musically, because you've just come back from Germany, I say just a few months ago, and there you've been working with Svan music.
Yeah, that was my dissertation thesis. And I joke that I become almost like Svan, half Svan, because I've lived there for quite a long time. I have my Svan family there. Chamgeliani family is my family now. I have a room there, and they often say I am their fourth sister. And yes, before I went up there, I was not in Svan music at all, but now I feel so much into it, and I understand this music so much deeper.
Wow.
Almost like Svan, almost. I wouldn't say like real Svan.
And you're introducing that to international people, or you have in the previous years with this Singing Village project, right?
Yes, you've heard of that. We started this project in Lahushti in 2011. Actually, it was again Madge Bray's initiative, her idea, and I think it worked very well. And funny thing is that 2 years ago, I was in the United States, in Washington. I was doing a workshop with a small group there. And after the workshop, we talked. They wanted to relax and we had a chat. And they said, one of the workshop participants, she said that she's been to Svaneti a couple of times. And I said, where in Svaneti? And she said, I don't think you would know that place because it's quite remote village. And where? Is it Upper Svaneti? Yes. And what the village is? And she said, La Hushti. And that was the village which nobody knew before 2011. And now this is a famous village, and I was so happy to hear that and so proud. And that was so strange that in Washington somebody tells me that you wouldn't know La Hushti, but she knew. It was beautiful.
Why was it important for Sathanao to be women in this time when you said about Anchiskati it was a boys' ensemble? Why was it important to have a women's parallel group, and why is it still important?
I don't think it was about women, really. It was a small group of enthusiasts, and some of them were boys, some of them were women. And because boys, originally, it's the music for men.
Chanting.
Women would not do that, and traditionally, unless you were part of the monastery, nunnery, or so. Therefore, this music would be sung by men. So men started because that was very natural, but they wanted to make it to publicize. No, what's the right wrong to popularize, to spread it, to make it. They wanted people to hear it more and to get back this music. So there were not many men to do that. And they said, maybe because you are also interested in this music, maybe you could also do that. Okay. That was very, very practical reason, nothing else.
But there wasn't some idea that women were like less good at singing or less talented or something.
No, it's. I think I think it's about just this. I don't know what's the canonics of the church require men to do this music traditionally, not because men are more talented or they are more able. No, this is like canonical thing. But now this is not that important. More important now today is that this music is sung in the churches. I remember one funny thing, when we started doing this music, it was so strange and so unusual because the aesthetics, it's not something which you immediately understand. So it was foreign in a way for us. But then we had these two schools, Western and Eastern schools, chanting schools. And because I was Gurian, for some reason I had this kind of singing style in my head, Gurian, a little bit like folk music, this kind of aesthetics or articulation or treating the phrase like that. And when we had to do something from Guria, the church songs, we felt that we had to do it in Gurian style. So we sang it in a way like like this. Aesthetics was slightly folk aesthetics. So one day when we were doing something long from Guria, one of the church songs, the priest was so shocked and he just left, he stopped service and he looked out. What are you doing there? Are you doing Shavi Shashu? Are you singing Shavi Shashu there? You know Shavi Shashu?
The blackbird.
Because that sounded nothing at all like church music, but more like Shavi Shashu.
Amazing.
But you wouldn't have known because, this was a new thing, these church songs. I see. Yeah. Wow. What does Voices of the Ancestors mean to you? This phrase, Voices of the Ancestors. Or have you already shown it with your family?
Voice of the Ancestors.
That's what our podcast is called.
Voice of the Ancestors. For me, it can be really very much literary voice, because this voice is in my head, has been in my head, and one of the voices I remember very vividly. This is really literary music, singing voice, let's say so, singing voice, physically singing voice. And I remember my grandfather, because I told you we had lots of guests and they had to drink quite a bit for hours. And then my grandfather would get drunk, and he would not go to bed immediately. And my grandmother would drag him, begging to go to bed, and drag him to bed, and eventually he would go to bed. And I remember the voice of my grandfather, the image. I still have this image in front of me. We had this. We had the bedrooms next to each other, and because we were afraid of staying by ourselves in our room, they would open the door so that we could feel that adults are there, just there with us. So open, and I often would see my grandfather, who was sleeping, but sometimes he would just slightly raise his head.
Singing in his sleep.
Absolutely. That was so typical, so common. And this is the voice of my ancestors I have in my head. I don't want to philosophize here. I don't want to make up something. My ancestors' voice is about love. My ancestors' voice is about tradition. My ancestors' voice is about loving the country, so on and so on. It's about values, yes, because you are brought up with values which you inherit via the voice of your ancestors. That's, let's say, it's philosophical part of it, partly, but literary and physical. This is my grandfather's image.
Love it. Brilliant.
Absolutely wonderful.
That's wonderful.
That was repeatedly, that was kind of repeating until he got sober. In the morning, he was already sober. He would not do that then. But a couple of times during the night, until I got sleep, I could hear that a couple of times.
Wow. That's so
Brilliant. Thank you for that answer.
Yes.
I love all the different answers we get to that
I
question.
know, me too. That was magic.
Yeah.
Multivar.
We are.
Yes. I think that's our sign.
Yeah, that's our sign. Rebuli is ready.
Thank you, Nana, for being our guest.
And I'm looking forward to hosting you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Voices of the Ancestors with Holly Taylor-Zuntz and Susan Thompson. Our guests were Nana, Rebuli and Marekhi Mzhavanadze. We didn't have time to talk about everything. Nana especially wanted to let you know about her research work with Frank Scherbaum at Potsdam University. There's a link to the Seismo Soundscape Lab on our website resources page. It's well worth a listen, not just for academics but also for singers. It has lots of recordings and a new way of seeing Svanetian song. The music in this episode was by Ioloni, Anshasrati, Bassiani, Sathanao and our guests. Sound production was by Johnny Darifi. For more information and to see a transcript of this episode and all our episodes, go to voicesoftheancestors.co.uk. And to help us achieve a sustainable podcast, click on Donate. Bye for now.
Haralalivo
მინდა ცხოვრებაში მინატრია სამი რამე და სილამაზე თამარისა და შოთას ნიჭი მწა